stuff, you know.
Weird, so that's
that,
how my mind. I said I'm weird. That's how my mind works. I think.
Well, that's
All the time.
Yeah, let's do it. You know, because it's better than just droning on and on with words. You know.
You know. Weird. Do you have it? Do you have the video curated? Because if you do, because I don't. I can.
I could get it up real quick.
Okay, because if he makes you the host, then it's just easier.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, because I've been checking it out.
I just got you the co-host powers. We are up, and I'm gonna just start to play some music while people begin to come in.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, why start a new song when we can sort of just ride with the wave of that one? Welcome everybody to another, our second edition of We Are Each Other's Harvest with the Paul Robeson House Museum. My name is Chris Rogers. I'm located in West Philadelphia right now, where the Robeson House is at 50th and Walnut Streets. I'm so excited about this conversation today. So We Are Each Other's Harvest borrows its title from the brilliant Chicago, and we got some Chicago people on the call today, the brilliant Chicago poet Gwendolyn Brooks, who was part of the amazing poem, the tribute to the great forerunner, Paul Robeson. And I'll post that link to the Freedom Ways edition that has many of these sort of like poetic tributes from Gwendolyn Brooks, Pablo Neruda, and a lot of other amazing contributions. So in this event series, we really just bring together two cultural workers, two friends, to have a conversation about the craft, about the work, and really like drawing on Paul Robeson's legacy of the role of art and artistic responsibility to like movements for freedom, and seeing how all these things come together. So we have some great speakers with us today, and I want to stick to the script. I have their bios with us, and also have some guiding questions. They asked me for guiding questions, so I tried to come up with a couple, broad, interesting questions that can help with the conversation. And how it worked is I'm going to do the bios, offer the guiding questions, and then just step back and enjoy the brilliance. Feel free to introduce yourself on the YouTube. Let folks know where you're coming from. And also, if there's any particular things that you want to make sure it gets into the chat, feel free to lift it up, and we'll see if we can weave it in. Yeah, so let me just get to these bios. Ashon T. Crawley is a performance-based and visual artist and curates audio-visual choreosonic events globally. He is the author of Black Pentecostal Breath, The Aesthetics of Possibility with Fordham University Press, and The Lonely Letters with Duke University Press. All his work is about otherwise possibility. The Lonely Letters is now available through Duke Press, and I'll post the link so you'll be able to see how to access that as well. And also we have, okay, let me just get to the bios. Let me stop playing. A member of the, oh, there it is. There's a copy. A member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences.
Yes.
Guthrie P. Ramsey Jr. is a music historian, pianist, and composer, a widely published writer. He's the author of Race Music, Black Cultures from Bebop to Hip Hop, which released in 2003, and The Amazing Bud Powell, Black Genius, Jazz History, and the Challenge of Bebop, which released in 2013. He has recently edited and wrote a foreword for Ray Linda's Brown, The Heart of a Woman, The Life and Music of Florence B. Price, which just dropped this year, or is dropping this year. You can tell us about that. As a producer, label head, and band leader, he's released 5 recording projects, including the newly released, which we just featured, A Spiritual Vibe Volume 1, and has performed at the Annenberg Theater for the Performing Arts, the Blue Note, and the Harlem Stage. He's recently scored the prize-winning documentary, Making Sweet Tea, Black Gay Men of the South, and his documentary, Amazing, The Test and Triumph of Bud Powell, was a selection of the Black Star Film Festival, which is coming back real soon. Shout out to Black Star Film Festival, going virtual this year. A conversation between 2 friends and culture workers with the Paul Robeson House Museum. This is We Are Each Other's Harvest. Oh, and now I get to surprise y'all with my questions.
Oh gosh.
So, yeah. So I sat with this morning, and here we go. So 2 sort of like guiding themes that we would love to hear from Paul Robeson House Museum. 1, the role of study. A lot of biographers point to Paul Robeson's time in London, that if he wasn't on the stage performing, he was in the study. We can see his deep study of world languages, people's movements, and the songs and music that carried them, which, a friend of all of ours, Dr. Shauna Redmond, writes about so beautifully. As you all think of your relationship to craft, what is the role of study, and what does that look like with your practice? Or even examples from musicians and artists that you both study and teach about. Certainly not just with the instrument itself, but what are the other ways experience, wisdom, history, relationship all fold into the labor of making art? That's my first question. I mean, my second one.
That's a good perspective.
Here's my second one. The art of listening. Who and or what taught you how to listen? Is it a gift? Is it a muscle? How do you practice listening? What are you listening for? I have always loved the story from jazz musician Henry Threadgill, who always says he draws on the German translation of rehearsal, which means to explore or go in search of. And that the work of rehearsal for his mostly improvisatory work is so that everyone gets a collective understanding of the piece, develops a way of working through it, so that during the performance, they could blow it up and do something totally different, which is wild to me. The idea that you are listening to one another in search of a collective feel, a collective rhythm, seemingly in order to actively refuse to be bound to perform that which you have just practiced.
Yep.
that you would get it to a place where it sounds good and then throw it all away in search of something else.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that helps with the context, as I would love to hear about your own sort of philosophy of listening and this relationship to improvisation. What does it mean to listen in search of something you haven't yet experienced? So those are my 2 questions. And now I take a step back and enjoy with the fans for this conversation to take place.
Ashon, you start with the.
Me? That's unfair. I am very happy to be. It's so weird to be talking about being here when you're in your house or whatever. But I'm happy to be virtually here with you in conversation. And I'm really thankful for the Paul Robeson House and all the work that they do. I went to Penn. For y'all that don't know, I went to Penn for undergrad, right down the street from the Paul Robeson House. And, you know, I was a different kind of person when I was at Penn. I was going through my transcript a couple of days ago, just looking at some stuff. And I took a course with you. I don't know if you remember, I took a course with you. I think it was Intro to African American Music, maybe, or Intro.
Yeah.
It was either that or no, it had to have been Intro to African American Music. And I was a bad student. That's all. I was a terrible student. I didn't really commit to, and I think this goes to the question of study, actually. I wasn't committed to studying at all. I was telling a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago that I went to Penn's library maybe 2 or 3 times my entire 5 years there. I started off in the engineering department, in the engineering school, thought I would do biomedical engineering and prosthesis work and bioethics, even though I didn't like biology, because I was interested in making a lot of money, and was taking all these other courses on the side, like Intro to African American Music, and taking sort of courses that were writing heavy, and was doing pretty well in those courses. But because I wasn't committed to study, I wasn't acquiring as much as I could have. And so for me, the answer to what is study is a practice of deep contemplation and community with others. It is not primarily about sitting in your office or sitting in your room or sitting on the couch and reading books and poring over them and thinking your deep thoughts by yourself. Study is the thing that happens after you have done that work. Study is the thing that you do in conversation when you are trying to figure out how to produce a practice that is based on the thing that you are trying to engage as a thought process. I think that sort of Cartesian dualistic thinking has really, really done terrible things to the way we think about what thought is. We think that the mind is split from the flesh. And so because of that distinction that we make, we try to make study the thing that you can do that only requires one's own mental faculties. And the thing that you do in the social is the thing that gets in the way of the thing that you want to do, which is study. But I think that study is the thing that happens with musicians. It's the thing that they practice constantly. When they are practicing together, that's what study is. Study is love, study is care, study is joy that is practiced as a communal and ongoing sense of an unsettlement with being done or finished or having completed something. And so for me, study is this beautiful this capacity to be in beautiful relation with others. And without others, I don't think study is possible. I think that you can read, and I think that you can acquire objects of knowledge, but I don't think that you can actually do the practice and the process of the thing we call study. And to answer the second question would be to answer the first question. How did I learn to listen? I learned to listen through learning to not just use my ears as the practice of sensing the thing we call hearing. I learned how to sense the world through my experiences in Black Pentecostalism. with the Hammond organ and the drums and the hand clapping and the speaking in tongues and the shouting, that there was so much dynamic happening in the life of a church service, very long church services, that were never boring. I don't, people always talk about church being boring. Church was not boring when I was sort of deeply a part of and enmeshed in the world of Pentecostalism. What it did teach me is how to have a sense perception for the thing we call listening, which meant that as a musician, I played the Hammond organ for several years. You are listening to the congregation to both feel what they are feeling, to anticipate feeling, and also to produce feeling. And so you're constantly engaging in this sort of this tripartite movement where you are behind the congregation and what's happening, you are in front of the congregation, and you are also with the congregation. And so it's like this it's the practice of a different kind of temporality. It's not linearly based at all. And so Pentecostalism Black Pentecostalism taught me how to listen, which meant more than just how to use my ears and how to sort of do a practice based on my eardrums. I don't know all the stuff that's in my ear, but y'all know what I mean. The thing that's happening in my ear, but listening to me meant like feeling more than it meant the thing that happens in the ear. It meant like having a sense perception for vibration, anticipating the movement of spirit and knowing how to, with the movement of spirit, move along with the congregation. And so listening is this deeply intimate practice that is also a kind of practice of study. And both of those things are deeply communal, deeply social practices that could not happen if it were not for a social relation that you are constantly sort of unfolding. That was long, sorry.
I wish it was brilliant. I wish I had gone first.
No, please.
Well, I do remember you on campus as an undergraduate. And so what years would that have been, Ashon?
1998 to 2003.
Okay, so those were my wonder years at Penn when I had just arrived as a junior professor, and so therefore really got studying on how to stay there, which means as you know, having gone through the tenure process as a professor, it really is about a kind of blazing focus on amassing a big stack of papers and reputation, and hoping that your local community, buttressed by the international community of scholars, will give you that golden ring, that you are, kind of permanently employed. I'll enter that study question with some Black vernacular. When people say, I ain't studying you, they what we mean by that is that I am not really focused on you. You know? So I guess study would be the opposite, is whatever you're focused on at the time, and by focus, I mean, I just started running through the idea, the things that I had called myself studying. As a church musician too, I remember that there were a time in my life, particularly when I was putting myself through college, that I had 3 church gigs. 8 a.m. I was at the United Methodist Church in South Side of Chicago. And then at 11 a.m., I was up at the Second Baptist Baptist Church in Evanston. Grand tradition of Black theologians and preachers, preached there. And I had the Echoes of Praise and the adult choir and the senior choir.
Nice.
That was my gig. And then by 2, that church ended at 1 p.m. And then by 2 p.m., I was headed over to the St. James Church of God in Christ on the west side, which is where I belonged.
Yeah.
I belonged there, and sat on the piano during that service. So by the time 2 o'clock, testimony service was just ending, and waiting for the pastor to parade down
Yeah.
the service from his office to begin that last testimony should be winding up by the time he
got there.
By the time he got there, right? So to operate in all three of those spaces as a musician, I had to study.
Mm-hmm.
I had to focus. I had to absorb in this grander sense of what you're talking about. Becoming ethnographically attuned to what each, as the musician, as the mediator, as you're putting it, the mediator of so much that happens in the church during the worship ritual, you have to, as you put it, really tune in to where things are. And the language through which we channel what these different churches, just to use the church metaphor, is through which chords you choose, how loud you play, how long you play a song, whether you're going to play all 4 stanzas of the hymn, which in some churches is the only way to do it.
And then some is 1, 2, and 4.
One, yeah, right. Some churches it's like, okay, we don't want to get into all of that. Once we get to the chorus and the hook,
that's all
we good. We're good. So yeah, that studying, I love how you're putting it. It's about a different kind of street smarts.
Yeah.
It's not about sequestering necessarily, although that's where you do your homework, but not necessarily the study. So I like that, how you frame that very much. And I really wanted to slip over to the Lonely Letters with that Cartesian split, but let me just answer that the second part of that, which was listening.
Learn to listen. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I think my listening, I just describe it as almost a kind of disease, because I'm a person who can recall everything that I've heard. Television shows where I can't remember the plot of television shows that I've seen before, but I remember every theme song.
Yeah.
And not just remember it, but actually can hear the different horn parts when the violins come in, and those, even the interstitial music, the little things they put in between scenes, I remember and recall all of those things. So I don't remember. I think some of us just come here with a kind of where senses are kind of doled out, where people are really focused on different senses. For instance, I'm married to an art historian, and the things that she remembers, in fact, the things that she even notices are there with her eyes are quite different than mine. I can walk past a statue or a monument for 20 years and not notice it. Whereas someone who's eye-minded, the whole world is organized around what they see.
Yeah.
So listening for me is as you put it, an all-encompassing practice. As you say, that when we're playing for churches, you're listening for when if you're accompanying someone who's tuning up and trying to shout, we know when the throat is gone.
Yep.
As the musician, we know that even if that preacher think they're gonna keep going, we just we kind of slide them back in and pull them back in. We can listen to a sermon that we've never heard before and know that it's time to leave your seat in the pew and slide back up to the organ, because it's time for that that service is about to come to some kind of culmination, and it's up to you to provide the transitional music from out of sermon mode to, well, in some churches it's into guilt mode because they want to come up to the altar.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah.
You know, or what needed to get cleansed and to recalibrate, let's call it, and repent. And so we've learned how to listen to, as you put it, spiritually. We listen sonically. You know, if somebody just starts singing out the out the air, you know, you got to kind of catch them. And it's just not in church, but I've had that in as a jazz musician. You know, you come up and people come up and, you know, it's time for a singer to sing a song, and she'll whisper in your ear, there'll never be another you in B flat. Okay. And then you're like, okay, I know that. And you get a little introduction, and then they start singing A Foggy Day in London Town. Okay. So you have to move to another song.
You gotta move. Yeah.
You gotta move. So yeah, I like that listening practice. Both studying and listening is a fully embodied practice that is not about isolation, but it is a social activity. I really dig that, man.
And it's a deep open, it's like I'm writing a book about the Hammond organ in the Black church, and so much of the good musicians, I like to tell people I was a musician that could get you from point A to point B in the church service. Like, I could get you from the beginning to the end of the church service with no gaps, but like, I'm not like a good church musician. Like, I'm the musician that you call when you ain't got the good ones, but you know, you need someone to just fill in for that Sunday. That's what I could do. But the good musicians are the ones that really fully make themselves available to, by making themselves open and like a conduit for everything that is happening in the life of the church service. But they can only get there if they are not focused on the instrument or the mechanics of the instrument. You have to have this deep knowledge of, and so like there is this study that is necessary between even like the human and the mechanical. You have to know the organ, you have to know the piano, you have to know the drums, if you are going to play in such a way that you are fully an instrument for the congregation, because you can't be focused on, okay, what are the chords that I'm supposed to use in B flat if I'm going to play this song, even in the jazz club, right? That you have to have this deep knowledge of the mechanics so that you can release whatever it is about the anxiety about playing them. And like, my problem was always, what are the chords in A flat again? Or what are the chords in A? Or what are the chords in E? Please don't sing a song in E. Please don't preach in E natural. Don't preach there. Because it's like, it's hard for me. But like A flat, I got you. And so like being worried about the mechanics of the instrument actually gets in the way of the kind of social engagement that the musician can have in the congregation. And so for me, one of the things that I constantly am struck by are the ways musicians have such a full knowledge of the actual mechanical instrument that they are using, that they don't have to have anxiety about playing that. What they are more fully sort of thinking about is what is happening and how can I respond to what's happening, not what is the key that this person is singing. And I think it's really something really beautiful that musicians like you, I mean, you can do it. I'm like, don't sing in this key, please.
Well, I have my favorite keys, and those I hope that they don't get up and start. Listen, if they get up and start something and it's not quite where I want them to be, we're only a half step away from where I can get down. Okay, so
I try to push, but sometimes. Because one time, this person, she was preaching in B natural.
Hey,
B natural. And I tried everything I could to either go down to B flat or go up to C. And she would not move. And I praise the tenacity of saying, this is the key that I'm preaching in and you just have to play it. But also it wasn't one of my better.
Hey, yes, when you get real minimal, you know, just boop, 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 boop.
Yep. This is very basic.
Just keep it.
That's all you got.
Keep it clean. Keep it
And
clean.
I was a musician for that church. We were visiting. It was a whole thing. We were visiting someone else's church, and so she was the guest preacher, and I was a student at Duke, and I had to leave because I had to go back to study for exams. And so once I got off the organ, the church organist got on and I guess was like, "This is how you really should play and be." And I couldn't even be embarrassed. It was just like, this is not.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that idea, that this idea about anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, and across all of the artistic practices and scholarly practices that you delve into, you know, in this robust kind of career and address. First of all, I have so much respect for what you have accomplished and are accomplishing in both the scholarly field, the artistic field. I don't know how you think it's perceived, you know, on the outside. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to know that, right? As you obviously have been so busy creating all of this stuff. But for me, I read it as a person who is hell bent on freedom.
Trying.
And you know, it's not as if you and someone who is anxious about freedom, and someone who is trying to work it out and not afraid to work it out in front of your audience, you know? Because I mean, even from the book, Pentecostal Breath, you knew that book was going to get into the hands of a Black Pentecostal at some point, you know. In fact, I've seen pictures of you on Facebook, you know, with your Pentecostal preaching parents, you know, holding that book, you know, and it's so much a study of someone who understands the orthodoxy, but who is at every point critiquing it and thinking about another possibility of ways to plug into that Pentecostal breath, as you put it. And then to be an academic who says that my second book is going to be a group of letters is what people can only call a courageous act. You know? You know, in the context of in the context of this strange, you know, as we call it, the academic world, as we call it, and it was quite a statement. It was almost like a declaration of independence that you were going to do what you wanted to do with this career and with your life.
Well, thank you for that. It's always heartening to have a mentor and someone who's made the path available for you speak kindly of the things that you do. So I appreciate it. It's not easy at all. I want my life to be about the freedom that I try to practice. And it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. I actually don't care about academia. It's not like I'm not, I started Duke. I didn't know what a tenure track job was. I didn't care for a tenure track. So like the reason why I'm doing the things I'm doing isn't because I was always on this trajectory to be a full professor at a university. That's not the motivating factor. I'm here because I think that the classroom can be a place of freedom. I told this very long story on Twitter, which I will not retell the entire thing, but I took a course at Penn called Minorities in the Media, which I wasn't, I thought I wouldn't learn anything from the course because I said, I was a very different person in 2001 when I took this course. I said, I'm a Black person and I know the media, so there's nothing this white professor woman can teach me about minorities in the media. And the first section was about Black representation. We read bell hooks. And I was like, sure, yes, this all makes sense. This is really terrible how they represent Black folks. The second was Latinx representation. Sure, yes, this is terrible. The third was Asian and Asian American representation. Sure, terrible. The third was LGBT representation. And I had an existential crisis because if I wanted to have integrity, I would have to admit that at least the same structure of of inequity that existed for Black representation and Latinx representation, Asian American representation, also is the same structure that exists for LGBTQ people in terms of media representation. That's if I wanted to have integrity. If I didn't want to have integrity, I could say, well, but the Bible still says that being queer is sinful. And for me, it was an existential crisis because the classroom at this particular point is now no longer just a place of abstract thinking. And it's not a place where I can say what they need to do. White folks need to stop being racist towards Black folks and Latinx people and Asian Americans. It had something to do with who I was and how I was going to have to be answerable to now this claim. And so for me, it was very, very difficult, but it was one of the most liberatory experiences I had because it compelled me to, and this is what I said on Twitter, it compelled me to really reckon with things that I was trying to avoid for a very, very, very long time. And so I don't think of the classroom as like a place of self-promotion. I don't care about that. I want to practice freedom and I want other people to practice it too. And I think that there are so many ways that we forestall our own capacity for liberation because we want to be integrated into the systems of domination. We just want other people to be targeted by those systems. And so, the Lonely Letters is something that interrupted me. I wasn't planning on this being the second book. The second book was going to be the book about the Hammond organ. And I had been writing this before. I tell people I wrote even a dissertation and decided that perhaps it was time to really think with these letters about how we act in the world. And so for me, I mean, it doesn't feel courageous, even when it feels scary.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this is the thing that has to be done in this way. And I get this from like my mama, who I tell people she got saved at the age of 14 and she's Kojic and she went to her band teacher. She was in the marching band and she played the flute. And she said to her marching band teacher, I can't be in the marching band anymore because I got saved yesterday and I can't wear pants anymore. And the teacher said, well, you can still practice with us so you can still get a grade, but you don't have to march with us. And I don't lift up that story to talk about wearing skirts. I don't actually care about, I'm agnostic about what you wear what you want. But I do think that there's something that I learned from my mother about conviction, that if you say you believe something, what are you going to do with your body in order to show that you believe that thing? And for me, I believe deeply in like, you have to posture your life in the direction of the thing that you say is urgent and necessary. And so even when it's scary, I mean, the Lonely Letters to me is the most scary thing I've done, but I feel like it had to be, it wrote itself. And so because it wrote itself, it had to be released. And whatever it does is what the thing that it does. It doesn't make it any less scary, but it doesn't feel courageous. It just feels like breathing. Like if I don't do this, I will not be able to breathe. If I don't say this thing that is probably gonna make you angry or probably gonna make you not talk to me anymore, I still have to say it because if I don't, I'm not honoring the social and ethical world that made me possible, which is this Pentecostal world that I critique all the time. And so for me, that's what that's what I was thinking through as I was trying to write these letters. What are the ways to really make urgent the fact that we can't and do not have the luxury of pretending that the things that we read about are only things that should remain in our heads, but how can we actually do the thing that we say we aspire toward, we believe in, the kind of social communities that we want. is there a practice, or are there practices that we can do with one another that will move us in the direction of the thing that we say we believe? And so that's what it's trying to do.
Right. Well, I know you. It's really hard to call oneself courageous. You know, I understand that. But I was wondering before this conversation what the connection was going to be between the spiritual vibe, this piece I did, and the Lonely Letters. And you've just given it to me, because one of the things that happened with my project is that I had to publicly own up to the fact that it was about me dealing with a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I, just from how I was socialized on how to be a man in the world, as not to publicly admit to failings, particularly physical ones, which is kind of, it just went against everything that I had been socialized to believe about myself and how I had operated up to that point. Whereas I had to say, okay, all right, I've been a musician. Of course, I'm going to make music and put it out. But am I going to act like it's about, hey, I'm the man?
Yeah.
Or is it about, hey, I was really scared.
Yeah.
and I could not deal with the facts that I was given.
Yeah.
And the only way I could deal with it was to do what I had always done, is just to go to the music.
Yeah.
And so
I see another connection, if I may.
Sure.
What I was struck by listening to, I was listening to it all this week, a spiritual vibe is, there are versions of songs, right? That they are reharmonizations, right? They are, they take, for example, Wade in the Water, but you take it and you take it in another direction, right? Not to say that the direction of the original Wade in the Water, whatever that would be, is the wrong direction, or that yours is the right direction. It's just a different possibility that is realized in the song. And that's what all of the songs, it seems to me, are doing on a spiritual vibe. It's that it is commentary on the practices that Black folks always do, which is to create versions of a thing in order to announce spirituality, in order to announce creativity, in order to announce fear. That all of these things that a spiritual vibe is doing is deeply a part of the reserve of the Black tradition, insofar as it says that there is no such thing as a finished song, because the song itself is always available to being reworked, remixed. That's what our musical tradition is. And it seems so appropriate that a spiritual vibe, an album that you say is born out of at least trying to contend with fear, without letting fear be the thing that it tries to deal with the fact of fear without letting fear be the only reason for its emergence. And so I think, people misunderstand Black life, I think, all of the time, because they think that all we do is ever in response to like whiteness, which another way would be to say that all Black folks do is respond to fear, that our lives are fear-based responses. And I totally disagree with that. And what's so fascinating is that, Spiritual Vibe is this album that is about the reality of fear without allowing fear to be the contour through which you produce the album. And so it's dealing with it, but it's not allowing for fear to totalize your capacity for creativity. And I think it's something really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I love that connection. We're talking about Ashon Crawley's The Lonely Letters. And I want to just give you an idea about how I experienced it.
Please.
And yeah, and then maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this was a challenge for me, because I understand it to be spoken through the vocabularies and the cloud of witnesses, I would say, of Black studies, performance studies, and Black feminist studies, as you put it. And you described beautifully in the opening gestures of the book how Fred Moten was your gateway, like a gateway drug into into this fascinating world that you discovered of kind of avant-garde Black expression. And Nathaniel, it led you to Nathaniel Mackey. How do you say that? I've read this a million times, but I've never said it. The Bedouin
Horn book.
Bedouin. The Bedouin Horn book, which is a series of letters as essays. Okay. And this serialization of the letter form in the book, and in the book you modeled the structure on, is for me about repetition, the repetition of the letter form, and how repetition, and you're using a sonic metaphor here, repetition allows a subject to discover something beneath the surface. So even though you're playing two chords, if you play those two chords long enough in a Pentecostal environment, as we both know, something moves up.
Something's gonna happen.
Something's gonna happen, right? In the social. So, and then so there are two fictional characters, a one-way correspondence between two subjects, A and subject B, Moth, right? So we get the inferences of Moth. We don't really get to hear from Moth, but we get to hear A's responses in their letter form. Okay, and like any good sermon, here's my two reactions to it. I just wanted to set that up for the audience so that they would want to orient themselves into the book. The two things that I wanted to point out is that although you pointed Nathaniel Mackey as one of the structural ancestors to this book, actually the Bible, the New Testament, right, in this epistolary form, right, could be another model for responding to the book, because like any good sermon, which I experienced these a kind of sermonic voice, because you do have a theological background and you discovered this while you were in seminary. There is this way that loneliness is presented as the problem, and not only just loneliness, but a specific Black queer loneliness. Okay, it's being set up as the problem with which you are wrestling with and attempting to solve. Never wallowing in it, it seems to me, because there's a lot of fight and unction in these forms, because you're continually digging for answers and making connections in it. In fact, the only time you cry is in the face of great art, or art that you think is fake, is particularly moving, right? So I wanted to ask you about those two things, the kind of biblical sermonic thing that I'm getting, where, with Paul, he starts out with a problem, like these people are, all these Galatians, what
are y'all doing?
What are y'all doing over there? And then, I want to just respond to that a little bit, and then talk a little bit more about it. It's a fascinating piece of work.
Well, I don't think it's disconnected from a sort of history of the epistolary form, which certainly has biblical literature, the Christian Testament as a part of it. Um, I do think that the relationship that A is writing about is sacred, and but I think like Paul, and like John, like any of them who wrote these letters, I don't think of them as scripture, right? I think of them as attempts to work with a specific kind of relation, to figure out a problem, to talk about an issue, to talk about joy. And the canonization of these letters is something that I don't think they were anticipating at all. I
Mm.
think they were just like, they're having a problem at the Church of Corinth again. So let me write this letter because they wrote me. So let me write in response to. And in that way, the relationship that the writers have with the churches or the people to whom they're writing is deeply sacred and beautiful and caring and loving. But it's not about the production of a kind of public letter that would then be interpreted as infallible,
Yeah,
unalterable,
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
unchangeable,
Hmm.
that they can be interrogated. The letter can be interrogated
Hmm.
because it was never about the production of scripture.
Hmm.
And so that's what I think about those letters. And that's what I think about what's happening between A and Moth as well. It's like, this isn't, A keeps saying that, he has a lot to learn, that there's a lot that he's failed on, that he's having to unlearn so much of his heteropatriarchy because it's the atmosphere in which we emerge. And so having to unlearn that is a daily practice. It's not like he says, I'm queer, and then all of a sudden he no longer has to contend with his own sexism, misogynoir. It's that he has to constantly work these things out as well. In terms of repetition, I think, the singing testimony service is one of the forms where the repetitious form I found to be deeply moving and spirited. And the letters are also sort of responding to sort of the form of Black Pentecostal worship, insofar as a lot that happens is repetitious. It happens over and over again. Within a church service and also across church services, but there's repetition with difference. And so that's one way that we can think about the repetition. And there's this film that I talk about in it, an oversimplification of her beauty, which at this point I've probably watched 20 or 30 times. And in that film, it starts with sort of the first vignette, which is the story of what happened between character A and character B. And it's really short. And then the more the narrative unfolds, they retell the story over and over again, but you get more and more information. And in some ways, this is also what the Lonely Letters is trying to do. It's saying the same things, I feel like, in the first letter. That's about seeing this person at this art museum and trying to figure out if is this person into me or not. That letter has within it everything that happens after. But all the other letters that come after are repetitious, but they are repeating, trying to figure out more of what is the thing that was sort of encapsulated in that one interaction between these two people, that actually repetition allows us to unfold if we sort of fall within the sort of atmosphere as opposed to staying on the surface of it. And so that's how repetition is functioning, I think.
I got that. I actually got that first vignette where you're telling the story of seeing a guy cross a room,
Mm-hmm.
and there were these points of connection,
Mm-hmm.
and then a conversation or two that evening, and it set up this idea for me about possibility, because you're talking about the possibility of connection,
Yeah.
the possibility of friendship plus,
Yeah. Yeah.
going on, because you're like, I'm vibing, this is my atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the art is on the wall. The cheap wine is flowing. It's just
It's all there.
everybody's you know, everybody's put together. You know, sartorially, everything is together, and it's the kind of place. And that's what an opening is. It's about possibilities. It's about what will this art do? What connections will you make? Because everybody's there. And then you get this connection, and then it's frustrated, you know, ultimately. And you spend the rest of the book through epistolary form interrogating the reason. I don't know whether it's the reason why. I couldn't really pick that up. Is it the reasons why? But because actually, the intimacy is the possibility for intimacy that you map out that you kind of create in the first vignette. I think it's a little lost in the other kind of metaphorical ways in which you were talking about Black life. Was that on purpose, or am I the first to respond in that way, or?
I think that the intimacy is there, but I think that it's felt. It has to be felt differently, and that's one of the frustrations of the relationship between Moth and A, is that they are trying to figure out what intimacy actually means after having had physical, what we call intimacy.
Right.
And Moth continually, you know, moving towards a sort of religious and cultural space that damns his affections for A. So the intimacy in which they shared is not lost, but it is recalibrated. And A being deeply frustrated with the recalibration of their intimacy, because the calibration of it isn't predicated upon Moth's wishes as much as predicated upon a doctrinal and theological space that says Moth cannot do the things that Moth should do if Moth wants to be a holy and acceptable person, or in another register, a normal man. That there are so many different ways that the practices of normal life interrupt the intimacies that we've already been practicing with one another. And so it's not for me, or I don't think that the intimacy in the book is lost as much as it is A is really trying to figure out how can they remain in relation with one another, given the fact of the urgency that they feel for one another, the physical ways that they've practiced with one another that they can no longer do because of a doctrinal and theological imposition that isn't it's not what A wants, and it's not what Moth wants. And so how can one remain in relation given the set of constraints that are there? And for me, that is also a question of Black life, given the set of constraints of anti-Black racism, given the set of constraints of misogynoir and queer antagonism that is ongoing. How can Black folks love one another in deep and joyful ways that honor who we are as a people? Can we love one another against the constraints that say that our love is demonic, that says that our love is something to relinquish in order to be normal? That's what the text is trying to at least think through, and what are the various ways intimacy can show up, and what are the ways that we refuse intimacy, and so we have to actually search for it. So it might seem lost, I think, but I think it's still very much a part of the. I mean, it's one of the reasons why A keeps writing Moth, because he still feels this thing, even when it's not named intention or explicitly, he still feels it.
I wish, you know, at one point in this in the narrative, I wish A would just went and gotten promiscuous, you know.
Well, see,
and of course that's a very heteronormative, patriarchal projection. You know what I mean? But it's certainly what some people in A's position would have resorted to and have resorted to.
And yeah, and it's because ultimately it has to be consensual. And and the consent has to be enthusiastic. Because A and Moth have had sex. So it's like, I don't know if you watch the show, I May Destroy You, but it's the show on HBO, which I think it's a limited run series, so it's just going to be one season. In this past episode, there's this character named Kwame who is Black queer man, and they're in the UK, and Kwame goes to this guy's house for a hookup. And the guy brings out 2 plates of food, and he's like, "Sit down, eat with me." And he's like, "You're joking. We're here for a hookup, right?" And he's like, "No, I actually want to just talk." And Kwame gets offended and stands up like, "Well, I'm leaving because I didn't come here for this. I came here to have sex, to fuck." And he, the dude just eats. And so Kwame is standing at the door and hesitatingly says, "I want a hug." And the dude puts his plate down, he stands up and they hug. And you can see Kwame breathe into the dude once he hugs him. I have been really the Lonely Letters isn't skittish about the fact that they have had sex multiple times. But I think I agree with Foucault. He has his interview, Friendship as a Way of Life, which I referenced throughout the text. I agree with him insofar as I do not actually think that sex, the physical act of sex between men, is the thing that people are the most repulsed by. I think that people are repulsed by the capacity for like holding hands, for hugging one another, for sitting next to each other, watching TV, falling asleep. That it is the mundane, the quotidian, the everyday, so-called ordinary acts of togetherness that is more unsettling to folks than, oh, they just had to get that physical shit out of them. And so for me, what was more interesting to talk about wasn't, the sex. Because I don't think the sex unsettles people, because it is eventual. It happens in moments and events, and it can be easily tucked away as that's just a thing that happened. What can't be easily enclosed is, yeah, I just kind of love this person.
Or buying a house together, and
not even buying a house, but like, I sat at a restaurant with you for 6 hours and I talked to you, and I've learned all this stuff about you, and I'm deeply moved. I think that actually scares people more. And so for me, it's more necessary to talk about the things that scare us, because the things that scare us might be the key toward our capacity to be liberated. Like the thing that scared me, I have this essay that should be published very soon, where I talk about when I was a kid, the thing that scared me about dying wasn't dying. The thing that scared me about dying was like the idea of eternity. Like that there is this thing that never ends, because your mind literally cannot cognize something that doesn't end. It was so scary and unknown. And I think of queerness in that way, where it is, for a very long time, it was the scary unknown thing, not the sex part. I was like on AOL chat rooms when I was 18 years old. Like the sex part didn't scare me. I was supposed to go on this date with this dude when I was at Penn, and he went to Temple, and I ghosted on him, stood him up. And I stood him up not because I was afraid that we would like go to my apartment. I was afraid that I would like him, because like, what do you do when this thing doesn't correspond to your understanding of affection, not your understanding of like physicality, but your understanding of what does it mean to be affectionate with someone who appears to the world as a man? What does it mean to be affectionate towards someone who is transgender? What does it mean to be affectionate towards someone? And then you begin to figure out that that question itself is a problem because it presumes a certain kind of integrity of our so-called identities that is supposed to exist and thus is supposed to predetermine who we can and cannot have affectionate relation to. And so it was very scary to begin to imagine the capacity for deep, intimate relationship that wasn't sex-based. That was scarier than like having sex with folks because it unsettles what you think of as your ordinary practice.
Mm.
It's not something that just happens in the dark of night or when you were drunk or, you know, when you were, whatever things that we use to dismiss physical practices, even though physical practices are important, which is why I put the painting in the book. I don't think of physical practices as unimportant, but I don't think physical interaction should take precedent over the unsettling fact of intimacy that isn't about sex at all, but is about just closeness. So I think that the closeness has both within it our capacity for being healed, but also it's the thing that scares us the most. I think it scares us more than anything else.
Okay, so I understand now that the friendship element of the argument that you are sustaining in the letters, because I thought that was a turn at first, but now I totally get what you mean by it. It's about the friendship that isn't the ordinary socio, you know, hetero or homo or whatever, you know, coming together and just being intimate in every way, not just in sex. Got it. Yeah, yeah.
It has to be more. I think though.
Yeah.
We should play a music video.
Oh, okay. Let's play. Let's play. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. How about this? Yeah, we'll do this, and we'll talk about it a little later. Let's get
Oh, you got it. You got it up?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can get you to share your screen.
Is it not being heard?
Oh, I can't. I don't see your screen.
Okay, let me share the screen. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Sorry.
Oh, you have to share your sound too. Zoom makes it all so difficult.
Right, right.
Share the sound. I thought that would just happen. Well,
you know what? Let me get on my Googles. Give us a introduction, and I'll get it up.
Yeah, there you go. Motherless Child, Guthrie, Ramsey, YouTube. You get it. Anyway, can I ask you another question about the letters?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because it's something you felt like the letters formed. There's some feelingness or feeling fullness in a letter that you somehow privileged over other forms of communication, you know, in terms of, you know, the essay or something like that. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you think that is?
I feel like the essay form, I feel like the letter form, similar to the song, is disarming in a way that I think you can say the same things that you say in theory and the same things you say in cultural studies and the same things that you say in women and gender studies. in a letter form and somehow saying dear blah and giving a sort of narrative to it, it doesn't make it any less dense. It doesn't make it any less urgent, but it does make it, I think, disarming in a way, because people understand the love letter to be a certain kind of form that has within it at least an addressee that understands that if you don't have the correspondence from the other person, you are implicated in the actual process of, well, I wonder what this person wrote to this person in order to receive this kind of response.
Yes, yes.
And so for me, I like the letter form for this project because I want to fully implicate the reader in the joy, but also the renunciation, the refusal that Moth is engaging. I want us to all think about what are the various ways that we refuse practices of love, joy, care, and concern that have been practiced with us, because we all do it in various kinds of ways and in multiple intensities. And so for me, the letter form is one that yields itself to that kind of self-critical reflection in ways that trying to write this as like a book of essays would be. I mean, some of the letters are actually essays that I wrote.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And at the Dear Moth at the beginning, and they're edited, but they are essays.
Right.
And then a lot of them aren't. And so, like, for me, because what they're all trying to do is to implicate the reader in that process. And so that's why I choose the letter form. Why do you choose the musical form, the song form for your latest project when you wanted to talk about fear? Why did you move to song?
I think perhaps even more poignantly, why did I choose songs that I knew everybody knew?
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's where all of the action is. And it's about, for me, having the truth claim of the lyric to be a non-starter, you know?
Yeah.
That people are not it's sort of like when you hear, you know how it is when you hear a cover of a song, a real good cover of a song that was a hit, and the person totally recontextualizes it musically, and for the first time you listen to all the words in a different way.
Yeah.
You're not experiencing it simply as a hit, you know, with all of the associations that go with the ubiquity of a song, you know, in our lives that's attached to moments and people and smells and all these predetermined things that you drag into every listening of that song. There's something about recontextualizing something that destabilizes the meaning.
Yeah.
And it opens up even lyrics and songs and melodies that we know to new meanings, and traffics in the potential, or using your word, the possibility for other meanings. So that's why I think this worked for me. Because I just like the power of the familiarity.
Yeah.
And then uncoupling it from any of the previous associations that people might have for it. Yeah.
Because
we can show them now too.
Say it again.
We can show them now too. You want to show them?
Good.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, from home, long, long way. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long, 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 long way from home. A long
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Can-
That's Ronaldo Maurice. He is in the Albanelli dance troupe
Oh, great. Yeah.
and sung by Vince Anthony, my frequent collaborator and partner. And yeah,
Can you say what you think about when you are constructing a song? Like, what are the primary things that you are trying to convey through the construction of a reharmonization? Because
yeah.
we know sometimes I feel like a motherless child. So what are you reaching for when you do that?
Similar, yeah, this is a great process question because I love the process of the painting thing that you put in the in the
Thank you.
book.
Thank
Yeah, that was cool. You know,
Thank you.
we need about 3 more sessions to really get into all this, but
It's
but
too-
yeah, man, it's too much. The one thing I try to do is to always, as I say, defamiliarize people with the with certain elements of the song. For instance, the things that people, this word about, what is this song about? It's about the melody, and it's about the words. So what's at my disposal, you know, to kind of fudge around with? I'm always a harmony person. I feel if I can get this song to set in another place through reharmonization and surprise and getting people to, if we think about the tonic as being the stabilizing force, the gravitational pull, to somehow deny that from a listener in some way, or to move them to another tonal center without a big, profound announcement in the way that we, you know, those of us who deal with tonality can do. It gives the song a kind of meta narrative, and into that meta narrative, if I haven't put any kind of didactic idea out there about what this means, it opens up for the listener, as you would put it, other possibilities for what this song could mean. One of the interesting things that happened when we were filming this piece is that a Black Lives, we were, the director, Henry Joseph, and the dancer were in DC filming this during the pandemic. And during the Black Lives Matter protests. And they were just out for a rehearsal to get some, you know, specifications together, and a Black Lives Matter protest broke out right behind them. And it was inadvertently filmed in a low definition, you know, setting on the camera. And the filmmaker wanted to, you know, was thinking about, well, I don't know whether we can use this because it's low definition. And then the cinematographer was like, oh boy, or the editor was like, this can never work. You know, we're not putting this out. But I kind of insisted that they kept some of that in, because that's why you see the varied kind of definitions in it. I didn't think we could, so all that to say is that sometimes you plan your process out and then something happens and you just embrace, you know, the new breath that was breathed on it.
That's like, the word you used is surprise. And I really like the word surprise, that you get interrupted by something you weren't anticipating. And sometimes surprises can be really delightful, and sometimes surprises can be really, really terrifying. And I think that one thing that the music does is, through refusing a certain kind of tonal resolve that the listener is anticipating, you are surprised and delighted, hopefully delighted, by what actually happens. And in that surprise and delight, you end up searching for more surprise as delightful. And so I think it's, I think it's really, and then they get surprised by this protest on the street. And so it makes sense that you insist on at least some of those elements being in the video, because it matches visually the kind of surprise that you are trying to produce for us sonically. And so it matches really well.
Thanks. And then, you know, then you have the fluidity and beauty of the movement grained against the idea of being motherless. You know, I think we're being summoned. We want our host to come on back in here and move us on out.
It was a quick hour and a half.
I think, like Dr. Guy said, there's so much to kind of continue. What is that form called when you like start with something in the beginning and the rest of it's getting deeper and deeper? I too love oversimplification of our beauty. And I'm like, yo, that's what this series is about. We are each other's harvest. We're drawing on Gwendolyn Brooks' words, right? We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And really just bringing, you know, different voices, different experiences together, and thinking of like, what is that work that we must do, right? To really like firm up ourselves and how that leads to our sort of like collective and shared liberation.
I have a question for you, okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because this is the thing. I'm like, how did you put me and Ashon together on a program? Because I have to say, he's one of these younger scholars, artists out there that I am so happy to just sit and listen to and read.
So it comes from,
you know, I don't even put, it's sort of like this guy is like, he's in the avant-garde, you know what I mean? And so I was just really honored. I was really honored, man.
I am honored as well.
Right, we have one of those Black men compliment contests. I see you.
I see you.
It's not legit. It's not legit unless we go there. Okay?
But it's true though. It's true too.
It's better than other options. Let me say.
I was just to respond to that. So how we've been growing, I think the beautiful work of the Robeson House is really like bringing like unique voices, people who have a deep like experience and relationship to community. You know, I came to know your work, Dr. Guy, mostly through my friend Shakira King, and telling me a lot about the project, telling me that we need to like work together. A previous moment, we have a piano that's kind of like untuned that Paul Robeson sort of like gifted to somebody that's still at the house. So in a previous moment, I was going to reach out to you to be like, is there anything we can do with this piano? Like work with us, figure something out. But it's also like bringing unique perspectives to the table. And the project, that Spiritual Vibe project, and also people who have a relationship to Philadelphia, because part of our work is the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. So matching, you know, it wasn't hard. I think it, you know, it totally makes sense. And I think y'all both are on this spiritual vibe, right? So kind of borrow from what Ashon are, that it's not surprising that this is delightful.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we, you know, come to a close here with this conversation, you're also, everyone who's watching this right now is going to be in on who's upcoming next with the We Are Each Other's Harvest series. So this is a special preview. I just made the flyer about an hour ago, and
it's hot off the press.
Yeah, it's hot off the press. So
extra.
Coming up next
is
Cassie Owens and Niela Orr, two amazing Philadelphia born and raised writers. They also have a piece in Believer Mag. I'll post it here so you can read it, about Black feeling and Black talk. Both are doing amazing work, sharing and collecting stories about the Black experience. So excited for this, coming up September 19th, 1 p.m., right back here on our Paul Robeson House YouTube. So feel free to continue to subscribe to the channel. We got some other events coming up, of course, on August 29th, a special Black August presentation. Dr. Edward Anasi, his book, Free the Land, and talking about the Republic of New Africa, their history, and sort of like Black revolutionary movements and how we sustain them. And we know that arts, culture, and music is, you know, critical to that legacy. Yeah, so as we come to a close here, you know, I'll post the Lonely Letters is available. Spiritual Vibe is on Bandcamp. The proceeds from a Spiritual Vibe benefit St. Paul's Baptist Church. We should give a shout. Tell us about St. Paul's Baptist Church a little bit, because I know they just got put into the church announcements.
St. Paul's Baptist Church is at 1000 Wallace. The pastor is Leslie Callahan. She is a former professor of religion at Penn, and now she's been the historic pastor of an historic church for the last 10 years at at a church that's 130 years old. She's the first Black woman pastor. It's a progressive church, and we delight in all the Savior's sins, you know. So we're a kind of church that we would just tear into the lonely letters. We'll, you know, she'll drop something that Ashon wrote into a sermon, you know, pretty easily, because we just are not into the hangups. We're trying to get people free and feed them, you know, both physically and spiritually, and whatever they need. We have a great project going on right now where we are working with youth to capture their feelings about being in the pandemic, and they're making their own documentary project there, and they're writing the musical score to it as well. So
That's beautiful.
that's kind of things we do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. So this has been an amazing experience. Thank you both for allowing us to archive this on our YouTube, and I imagine many will revisit and continue to like draw on the gems and in many sort of like points of reflection. Adrienne Dent spoke about like embodied courage and working through fear as something that really spoke to her through this conversation. So we'll continue on with that and continue to work with y'all in other formats too, and collaborate. And, you know, when we come out of this sort of moment that we're in, find space to get you all at the house too.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I've already written you into a proposal, the Paul Robeson House. So
that's what we need.
I'll tell you about it one of these days.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I will write somebody in, and then
you know,
if we get funded, then I'll tell you. You know what I'm saying? But word. All right, let's close this door. Thank you all for watching out on YouTube, and please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, talk to you.
Talk to you.